Welcome to worship. I'm Kip Rosen. I'm one of the pastors here. A surgeon, an architect, and a politician found themselves in a friendly debate about which of their honored professions was the oldest. The surgeon said, well, during creation of the world, God removed a rib from Adam in order to create Eve. That was obviously a surgical procedure. The architect said, yes, but before that, the world was formless, a watery chaos, and then the God Spirit moved upon it. The precision of the universe had to be the result of a master architect. The politician, taking a long puff from his cigar, smiled and said, yes, but who do you think created that chaos in the first place? Genesis chapter 1 shares a story of creation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. You probably know the story. On day 1, God creates light, day and night. Day 2, God separates the waters above from the waters below, sky and earth. Day 3, God separates the waters on the earth so that there's sea and land, and God creates plants and trees, fruits and seeds. And it was good. Day 4, God creates the lights in the sky and separates the day from the night. There are sun, moon, and stars. There are seasons, days, and years. And it was good. Day 5, God creates all the living creatures in the water, even sea monsters, the birds of the air. He tells them all to be fruitful and multiply, and it was good. And then on day 6, God creates all the living creatures on earth, cattle, creeping things, and wild animals, and it was good. Then God said, I'll read it from Genesis 1, chapter 1, verse 26 and 27. Then God said, let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. And then a few verses later it says, God saw everything that he had made, and indeed, it was very good. The creation story teaches us something about God and something about creation, something about us as humans, something about our relationship with God. What's the lesson we might learn as we look at the story? Well, those of you who are football fans know that it's the NFL preseason time. There's 2 games left to be played this weekend. The winner of each of those games are going to find themselves in the Super Bowl on Sunday, February 11th. The Kansas City Chiefs play the Baltimore Ravens. The San Francisco 49ers face the Detroit Lions. There have been some very close games leading up to this point. The Chiefs beat the Buffalo Bills in a very close game. With less than 2 minutes left in the game, the Bills had a chance to tie the game with a 44-yard field goal. Tyler Bass, the Bills kicker, missed the 3-point attempt as it went wide to the right, a painful loss for Bills fans. And it brought to mind another missed field goal in an NFL playoff game. 5 years ago, the Chicago Bears were playing the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC wildcard playoff game. And with 10 seconds left in the game, the Bears are only behind by 1 point. And the Bears have the ball. They're going to kick a 43-yard field goal to win the game. The Bears' kicker was Cody Parkey. Parkey had set an NFL record the previous year for rookie scoring, and he had already kicked 3 field goals in this game against the Eagles, which were the prior year's Super Bowl champs. He would bring home a victory if he made this field goal, but he missed. And his kick would become known as the double doink. The ball traveled 43 yards and it hit the left upright of the goalpost, doink. And then it bounced off the crossbar, doink, and finally fell back out into the end zone, no score. An NBC commentator, Chris Collinsworth, said during the replay, the Bears' season's gonna end on a double doink. What a disappointing, painful loss. Parkey was asked after the game, why didn't you avoid the press? You knew the questions were going to be so hard. Why didn't you go home and just hide out with your family? How did you handle all this? And Parkey answered that question on the Today Show. He said, well, obviously I'm disappointed. I let my fans, my teammates, and the whole organization down. But I'll continue to keep my head held high because, listen to what he said. He said, because football is what I do. It's not who I am. Now, you might think that the media would have a little understanding, especially when they found out that an Eagles player had deflected the ball on that kick. He got a hand on it. The double doink was caused by a partially blocked kick. It's not the kicker's fault. But sports talk radio erupted in rage at Parkey. How can you say that football is only what you do and not who you are? The Today Show hosts were kind to him. They said, you're a class act. You really showed us what you're made of. But sports talk radio said, the game is your gig. How you play determines your career, and your career determines whether you are a success or a failure. Don't say football doesn't define you. Either you can play or you can't, and that is what defines you. Wow, pretty harsh, right? But I wonder, do you agree or disagree? Does what you do define who you are? Does your success and career, your relationships, your family, what your kids do, what others think of you, what you do and how well you've done, do those things define you? Or is there something deeper? Is there something more? Is there a foundation in your life which is more solid than any of those things? In other words, when a circumstance unwinds you, a failure confines you, what is it that defines you? Well, how about these words for a definition? You are made in the image of God. In the very first chapter of the Bible, we're told this bold truth. And let me tell you, at the hardest moments of life or career, when there are people who think you're foolish or wrong or misguided or worthless, remember this. Your identity is not your job. Your identity is not your mistakes. It's not your failures. Your identity is in Jesus Christ. When success abandons you or opinions assault you, remember you are made in the image of God, regardless of what anybody else thinks or says. And that ultimately is our hope. And that ultimately is the value that God gives to me, to you, to everybody else. We are made in the image of God. Well, what does that mean? Well, one thing it means if you're human, the image of God cannot be separated from you. In verse 26 of Genesis, it says, let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness. And now, just an aside, it's interesting that God is referred to as plural, our image, our likeness, God and who else? This is just a little aside here, but the New Interpreter's Bible Commentary says that this might be referring to the divine council or heavenly court. In other words, those who are not God are called to participate in this act of creation with God. God is not in heaven alone, but is in relationship with the divine realm. And God chooses to share the creative process with others. And we, as humans, are created in the image of the one who chooses to create in a way that shares power with others. That is the image of God. It's relationship. Being made in the image of God means we mirror God in the world. This image of God that we possess is a reflection of God's image that is inseparable in terms of what it means to be human. Now, we're not God. We are not claiming to be little gods, but we are a reflection of God. Peter W. Marty, who is a Lutheran pastor in Iowa and publisher of the Christian Century, wrote a short reflection about the image of God. And he shares in that a story of angels who were bothered when they learned that God had planned to make human beings in God's own image. How can something so precious and powerful be entrusted to this creature? So they conspired to hide the image of God where no one would ever think to look for it. How about we put it at the bottom of the sea where no one ever goes, suggested one angel. No, At the top of the highest mountain that no one would ever scale would be better, said another angel. And one by one the suggestions rolled in, only to be rejected by the larger company of angels. Then the shrewdest of all the angels offered the best idea of the day. Let's hide the divine image in the heart of every man and woman. That's the last place in the world they'll look for it. So the angels hid the precious divine image within the heart of human beings, where it has resided ever since. We are made in the image of God. You might say it's a matter of the heart. And Marty goes on to write about what it means to be made in the image of God. He says we shouldn't miss the detail that we humans do not have all the sixth day of creation to ourselves. God has us sharing the limelight with cows that burp methane and with creeping things that gave birth to the whole pest control industry. And yet there's something special about this human creature. As preaching instructor Fred Craddock put it, God said, I'm proud of the squirrel, I love the elephant, the horse is good, the mule is nice, and I do like these llamas, but the one that is exactly like me is this one. And I have breathed into this one my own life. If pressed, Craddock might have reconsidered his phrase, exactly like me. Human beings are not replicas or strict imitations of God. Likeness or resemblance hits closer to the mark. The Hebrew word translated image is from a root word meaning shade or shadow. Think of a young boy outside on a sunny day trying to outrun his shadow on the sidewalk. First he stomps on it curiously, baffled at how anything could look and move so much like him. Then he attempts to run away from it, figuring his speed will surely allow for separation. But in the end he discovers that he cannot shake his shadow. As with every other shadow, it remains inseparably tied to its source. You hear that? Tied to its source. Can't be separated from its source. And Marty writes, I sometimes think about people who spend their lives running from God, stretching out their independence like an expanded rubber band, only to eventually learn that they cannot escape the one from whose image they originate. And Marty suggests that since the Genesis account makes no mention of God's bodily appearance, we ought to focus our ideas of resemblance on God's activities and God's powers. God speaks, names, blesses, and beholds. God makes and sets free. God expresses care and pronounces goodness. Squirrels, elephants, and llamas cannot plan, create, or contemplate. Horses and mules cannot marvel, feel awe, or articulate a future. But human beings can. And there's something else we can do. We can love. Because God is love, it stands to reason that where love is found wanting in the human heart, it's going to be a struggle to locate the image of God hidden there, right where the angels put it. We are made in the image of God. We are a reflection of God. We're a shadow of God. We're a chip off the divine block, a spitting image of our heavenly parent. Before you were born, God molded you in the depths of the earth and knitted you together in your mother's womb, says Jeremiah and the psalmist. God carved you on the palm of his hand and has hidden you in the shadow of his embrace, says Isaiah and the psalmist. Even the hairs on your head are numbered, says Jesus in Luke's gospel. Whether you're red, yellow, black, or white, you are precious in God's sight. That is the foundation of who you are. That's your identity. Someone said, we're not made to act like a monkey, breed like a rabbit, fight like a tiger, or roar like a lion. You were made to be a human being created as a reflection of God on earth. You're more than a complex animal. You're a child of God. You have the power to reason, the capability to love, the ability to serve. You're a human being. And there's no such thing as just a mere human being. You're a precious human being. As children of God, we reflect God in our lives. We're in partnership with God. We're supposed to help God take care of this place. We've been given dominion over creation, Genesis 1 says. We're responsible to make this place safe. And if our streams are polluted, it's our issue. If the globe is getting warmer, then it's our problem. Sooner or later, we must become accountable to God who created us and put us in charge of this place. As children of God, we're called to be faithful to the image that we bear. We're also called to be fruitful. When God created the animals and humans, we're told to be fruitful and multiply. Someone said that this is the only commandment we've really kept, be fruitful. And yet we know that in other places in the Bible, God meant more than just having children when we talk about being fruitful. Be fruitful. Sow the seeds of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. We are made in the image of God. For several years after he retired from teaching at Candler School of Theology at Emory University, Fred Craddock served a little country church in rural northern Georgia, a church that he helped to start. And he said he was one day called to a small county hospital when a baby was born. Not many babies were born in this little 30-bed emergency facility, so it was obvious this was a poor backwoods family. And Fred met the father in the hallway near the hospital nursery, and he asked the baby's name. Elizabeth, the father said. And they couldn't hear her through the glass window, but it was obvious she was screaming. And trying to be a comforting pastor, Fred said to the father, "You know, the baby's not sick or anything. It's good for them to scream. It clears their lungs." And the simple father says, "Oh, I know she ain't sick. She's just mad." Fred said, "Well, why would she be mad?" Father said, "Well, wouldn't you be if one minute you were with God in heaven and the next minute you were in Georgia?" And Craddock thought, man, I've got me a real mountain Gnostic on my hands. This guy's been reading Plato. And he said to the father, "Do you believe that she was with God before she came here?" And the father said, "Oh, yeah." And Fred said, "Do you think she'll remember?" And the new father replied, "Well, that's up to her ma and me. We've got to make sure she remembers who she is. Because if she forgets, she's a goner." Who are you? What defines you? Is it what you do, where you live, what people say about you? What really defines you? Whose image do you bear? Remember who you are. You are made in the image of God. You are a beloved son, a beloved daughter, a beloved child of God. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is thy name in all the earth. Your glory is chanted above the heavens by the mouth of babes and infants. And yet you have made us humans little less than God and crowned us with glory and honor. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is thy name in all the earth.